want to welcome the members, guests, staff to the March meeting of DASNY, the DASNY board. Interesting, our second meeting in New York this year of the 3 meetings we will have had when this one is over. So I guess we're about to spend the next 6 months in Albany.
2 months.
Okay. All right. Good. We've got a lot to cover today, so I thought rather than talking about how beautiful the day is and how great the view is, I thought that I would simply go directly into the meeting. You all had a chance to review the minutes of last month's meeting. Are there any proposed corrections, revisions? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of the February meeting? Sandra, thank you. Is there a second? Paul, thank you very much. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. There's no opposition. Minutes are approved.
Mr. Chair,
yes,
I'm very surprised that you didn't take advantage of the clarity of this day, because you generally opine on that. Can you do that for at least 10 seconds, please?
I can, but there were people in the room who said, enough of that.
Point of order, it's not on the agenda.
It's not.
It's not on the script. I'll exercise a little bit of administrative discretion. This is an absolutely gorgeous day. If you haven't taken a moment to just turn around and look at it, the cloud cover is perfect. It's as clear as a bell. I gather the lights are back on the Statue of Liberty. Life is good on the 52nd floor of this building today. And Connie, I'm so sorry that you get to turn around and look at that column. Good. Because they actually had me for a time sitting in front of that column so that I couldn't see except peripherally what was going on outside. It's a great day. Glad you could all be here. We've approved the minutes. We'll go to the second agenda item, which is a Finance Committee report. Mr. Romsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We met yesterday afternoon. There was by video conference also in Albany. We adopted the meeting minutes from the February committee meeting, and then we advanced and discussed 3 financing: SUNY dormitory facilities, Schools District Revenue Bond financing, and the Cerebral Palsy Association financing. And after some discussion, we recommend that they all be approved at the today's meeting. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Jerry. Are there any questions?
Oh, we also adopted the charter.
Yes, we did.
Sorry about that. There were no changes from the prior charter, but we readopted it.
Outstanding.
Thank you.
Hearing no questions for Jerry, we'll move to the adoption of financing documents, and the President will present.
Thank you. Good morning. The first item for your consideration today was sent in the second mailing and is the adoption of documents for Siena College. Apologies to all of the Siena College alumni for 2 nights ago. It
was a hell of an effort. It was a hell of an effort.
It was a heck of an effort. With Steve, they probably could have used Steve Kosher.
Let her last shot.
That's right. Presenting an update and bond counsel Charles Carey and Megan Burke of Mintz Levin and Sarathi Ray of Lewis and Monday. Please come on down.
I want to welcome the Mintz Levins to the table. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Prior to co-bond counsel presenting the documents, I will summarize the recent information from the credit summary update. As you will recall, the resolution to proceed authorized either a public offering or a private placement of the Series 2017 bonds. Siena has elected to proceed with a private placement with 2 qualified institutional buyers, Key Government Finance Inc. and Berkshire Bank. Key will purchase up to $27 million of the Series 2017 bonds, and Berkshire Bank will purchase up to $12.5 million. Series 2017 bond proceeds will be used to refund the college's DASNY Series 2006 and Series 2009 bonds, and to finance approximately $2 million in new money projects. The new money component is expected to amortize over approximately 15 years, and the refunding bonds are expected to have a final maturity matching the final maturity of the bonds being refunded. 2026 for the Series 2006 bonds and 2039 for the Series 2009 bonds. The current expectation is that proceeds from both Key and Berkshire will be used towards each of the refundings as well as the new money. The portion of the bonds being purchased by Berkshire is expected to fully amortize prior to their final maturity of approximately 6 years in 2023. The Key bonds will also begin amortizing in 2017 and will go through 2039. However, they will be subject to a tender after approximately 10 years, at which time the college may choose to either refinance or negotiate a renewal. That concludes my update. If there are any questions on the financing structure, I'd be happy to take them now or after.
Questions for Steve?
Steve, you know that there may be additional bonds refunded?
I'm sorry. Additional bonds?
Yeah, if market conditions improve by 50 basis points.
This is the Sienna. This is the
I'm
Sienna
sorry, I'm
College.
in the wrong.
That's all right.
I'll hold the question.
Before you all start, I hope you will forgive me,
Same
Sarathi.
time.
I did not. I
Right,
failed
because
to
they
welcome
put them-
Lewis and Money to the table. Thank you for.
Sort of like the they
Like
dumped
tab
in
at the
two.
wrong,
It's okay. I put mine too. There are no questions for Steve. Please tell us about the documents.
Sure. Good morning. I'm Megan Burke from Minslevin. So before you today, for your consideration, is the adoption for Siena College of a new general resolution and 2 series resolutions that authorize the issuance of up to $45 million principal amount of fixed or variable rate, federally taxable or tax-exempt bonds on behalf of Siena College, with maturities that would not exceed 23 years. Steve mentioned the proceeds of the bonds are being used in 2 ways. First, for the new money project, which is campus-wide rehabilitation and maintenance, including HVAC, mechanical, and fire prevention system upgrades in various buildings. And the refunding is all of the outstanding DASNY bonds for Siena College that were issued in 2006 and 2009. The proceeds will also be used to pay the cost of issuance of the new 2017 bonds. It's currently expected that DASNY will issue 2 sub-series of tax-exempt, unenhanced bonds that will be sold in a private placement transaction, with 1 series sold to Key Government Finance, Inc., and the other sub-series to Berkshire Bank. Both of the sub-series would be privately placed by RBC Capital Markets as placement agent. The new bonds, the 2017 bonds, are currently expected to bear interest at a fixed rate that's calculated as a spread against an index rate, but will be locked in, with the Key Bank sub-series holding that price until the mandatory tender at 10 years, and the Berkshire Bank until maturity in 6 years. The new bonds will be special obligations of DASNY secured by the pledge and assignment of revenues, DASNY's security interest in the college's pledged revenues, and the monies and investments held in the funds and accounts established by the resolutions. The general resolution authorizes the issuance of multiple series of bonds at 1 or more times and permits the collateral utilized as security for the bonds that's issued under the resolution to also be used to secure other debt of the college on the parity basis. The series resolutions delegate to certain officers of the authority to finalize the terms in accordance with the parameters set forth in the resolution and to enter into a loan agreement and other transaction documents. And Sarathi is going to tell you more about the loan agreement and a few other details of the transaction.
Thank you, Megan. Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Sarathi Ray from Lewis and Monday. Megan stated the authority and Siena College will enter into a loan agreement in connection with the series 2017 bonds, under which the Siena College will be required to make timely payment of debt service on the bonds and to pay DASNY's fees. The college's obligation to make these payments under the loan agreement will be a general obligation of the college, secured by a pledge of the college's revenues and their right to receive such revenues. These pledged revenues will consist of gross revenues, including without limitation tuition and fees. The loan agreement will permit the college to incur additional indebtedness secured on a parity lien on the pledged revenues upon satisfaction of financial covenants. For example, the purchaser is expected to require a negative pledge on the college's main facility and on unrestricted cash and investment assets. Further, the transaction documents will also contain certain financial covenants required by the purchasers, including a continuing covenants agreement with each of the purchasers, a default under which would constitute a default under the loan agreement. Finally, in accordance with DASNY's financing guidelines, the series resolutions contain restrictions on the ownership and transfer of the Series 2017 bonds. Specifically, the series resolutions restrict the ownership and transfer to qualified institutional buyers, and the purchasers will make representations to that effect, including that they have not relied on the authority in making their investment decision to purchase 2017 bonds.
Where is that stated again?
It's in the
loan?
It's in it, no.
the letter.
It's gonna be in the series resolution, the bond purchase agreement, and then on the face of the bonds.
Okay.
And
Okay.
but no, not
Okay.
the one.
I didn't see
You
the
look
loan.
at the one
Right.
document that is not.
Right.
Just out of curiosity, the refinancing, is it going, are the bonds being refinanced, are they also private placement, or were they publicly issued?
They were publicly issued.
I guess yet another indication of things moving more towards private placement.
True. Are there other questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the transaction? Thank you, Gerard. Is there a second? Thank you. All in favor, please indicate by aye. Aye. There are none opposed, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Good to have you.
I think Darrell raised something very important, and I just want to highlight, I think Mike and Portia are working on ways that we can be in front of these private placements. And Mike, maybe you want to try to put you on the spot, but we've talked about process.
That's correct. One of the projects we're running in Council's office with Portia and Public Finance is tuning up our internal procedures for private placements, so that we have more of an internal roadmap on how these are processed. So we are working on that currently.
Because the trend just seems to be gradually, or not less gradually, moving more towards private placement. So we should have, and it's not rated by the rating agencies, and we should, really get things, we should be ahead of it. I think that's an excellent.
And Portia and I, we're working collaboratively with a couple of other stakeholders in this process to see how we can be assured that we're not cannibalizing our business.
Right.
All right, and so be a value-added player at each step of the process. So what we talk about is, again, we have a finance business, and how can we identify adjacencies in those businesses, so that little interstitial space that a lot of change is taking shape in, we think we can capture some of that. So we'll come back and talk to folks about it, but Mike has started a process on the legal side. Portia is building out a process with her team. We're asking a lot of questions. So I just want to take.
Thank you very much. Very good.
Thank you.
Yep. Tab 3. All right. Behind tab 3 is SUNY Dormitory Facilities Single Approval Credit Summary with Gerard Clauser, presenting, and bond counsel Virginia Wong of Nixon Peabody, LLP, and Vivian Drohan of Drohan Legal.
Good morning.
Morning.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, DASNY management, and guests, the single approval credit summary and staff report provided to the members is seeking authorization for the approval of documents for the SUNY Dormitory Facilities Revenue Bond Series 2017. The board is being asked to authorize and adopt the necessary documents under the SUNY Dormitory Facilities Revenue Bonds Program in order for the authority to issue one or more series to be issued at one or more times, tax-exempt and or taxable bonds to be sold on a negotiated basis. The proposed bond issue will be for a term not to exceed 30 years and will be in an amount not to exceed $375 million. Bond proceeds will be used to finance various capital projects at SUNY campuses throughout the state and to refund all or a portion of various DASNY lease revenue bonds, consisting of the Series 2008A, 2009A, 2010A, 2011A, and Series 2012A bonds, collectively the refunded bonds. You may recall legislation submitted as a part of the fiscal year 2014 executive budget authorized a new SUNY dorms program supported solely by the rents, fees, and charges of the dorm rentals. This legislation authorized SUNY to transfer or assign to DASNY all rights in the dormitory facilities revenues and required SUNY to immediately pay such revenues without appropriation to the Commissioner of Taxation and Finance for the deposit to the new Dormitory Facilities Revenue Fund. The fund is held separate and apart from the state treasury monies and is used first to pay the principal and interest on the old SUNY dormitory bonds and then debt service on bonds issued under the new program to fund operations and maintenance and repair and replacement funds. The SUNY Residence Hall program operates on 25 campuses and serves over 70,000 students on an annual basis. There are approximately 400 facilities in the Residence Hall program. Each campus has its own unique mix of housing options. SUNY covenants to charge dorm rates sufficient to pay all debt service, fund all reserve requirements, and to pay all operating costs. In fiscal year 2015-16, the SUNY Residence Hall program generated total revenue of approximately $545.5 million and had a debt service coverage of 1.54 to 1. The security features will include bonds issued under this new program have a second lien on the dormitory rentals deposited in the Tax and Finance Dormitory Facilities Revenue Fund. Bonds currently outstanding under the old SUNY Dorm Facilities Program will have the first lien on the dorm rental revenue. Special considerations. SUNY dormitories have an occupancy rate of approximately 96%, resulting in strong rental revenues. The SUNY Dormitory Facility Revenue Bond Program will not have a state appropriation feature, eliminating appropriation risk. Current market conditions would result in the advance refunding of all or a portion of the 2008A, Series 2010A, and 2011A bonds. If market conditions were to improve by 50 basis points, portions of the 2009A and 2012A may qualify for refunding of an additional $112 million. These comments made to the credit summary represent the revenue, the revisions provided in the late mailing on March 2. This will be the fourth financing. It will be similar to the other SUNY dormitory transactions under the new SUNY Dorms program. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Gerard. Are there questions for Gerard before we?
No, I can ask questions. The savings analysis was done on 8, 10, and 11 bonds. If you were to do the additional refunding, is the savings analysis basically the same?
There were two savings analyses done. There was one that included all of the program, all of the refunded bonds identified, including
The one I see here, I think that was attached to the original
correct.
was at least as references.
That's the
in
2008, the 2000.
10 and 11.
And if there was an improvement, 50 basis points, then two additional issues could potentially be included: the 2009 and the 2012.
And would the savings analysis essentially be the same?
No, it wouldn't. It would increase by 112 million, right?
But the criteria would be the same to determine what bonds are refundable and what bonds aren't.
Thank you.
So that was the reason that we're asking for the 375 million. The 112 bumps it up to that threshold.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, John.
Remind me, who determines what the rental rates are at the State University dormitories?
Each campus.
Each campus does it independently?
Yes, that's why actually there's a chart in here
that has the different rents. That's what made me curious about it. And so they are
set by the campus.
And I also notice in here that there are 5, I think, campuses that have occupancy rates that are much less than the average occupancy rate in the low 80s. Yeah. So I guess my next question is how does this fit? Is there any impact on the Excelsior program here, which should attract more students to some of these smaller colleges upstate? Or is that not an issue at this point because it hasn't been approved?
We have spoken with SUNY regarding the, there are 5 schools which have lower occupancy rates than the other. They indicated that it went along the lines of some of these schools are in specialties that may not be as popular or at the moment. And regarding the Excelsior program, the interpretation is we have taken that into consideration, and we think that that could potentially make the rental revenues more significant or increase it.
So John, even, we clearly wanted to highlight that there were 5 institutions where the occupancy rate was lower than 90%, but on an overall basis, when you look at the entire portfolio, the occupancy rate is quite strong, and that's really the driver of the revenues that are coming into the program.
But there's no legislative action required for rentals, rentals.
No.
This is a unilateral act on state university. That's good.
I agree. Are there other questions before we go to the legal analysis of the documents? Hearing none, Virginia?
Before you today for your adoption are 2 series resolutions, each authorizing up to $375 million in bonds pursuant to the authority's State University Dormitory Facilities Revenue Bond Resolution, adopted in May 2013. In no event can the principal amount of both series of bonds exceed $375 million in the aggregate. Each series resolution authorizes bonds to be issued, first to finance new capital expenditures in connection with the SUNY dormitory authorities, 2, to refund certain bonds previously issued by the authority pursuant to a prior resolution adopted by the authority in 1995, 3, to pay capitalized interest on the authorized bonds, and 4, to pay cost of issuance of the authorized bonds. Each series resolution authorizes bonds further delegates to various officers of the authority certain terms of the bonds, including first, a final maturity date, which shall not be more than 30 years from the date of issuance. Second, the interest rates to be borne by the bonds, provided that the true interest cost does not exceed 7.5%. And third, the terms of redemption or purchase in lieu of redemption for the authorized bonds. No debt service reserve fund is expected to be established, and no credit enhancement is expected to be procured for the authorized bonds, although the series resolutions do authorize both if the authority decides that market conditions dictates one or both. The series resolutions also authorize various offices to execute and deliver a preliminary and final official statement, a bond purchase agreement, a continuing disclosure agreement, and all other documents necessary and convenient for the sale and issuance of the bonds and the refunding of the refunding bonds. The bonds to be refunded will be determined at the time of pricing and will satisfy the refunding criteria applied by the state and the authority in determining eligible refunding candidates.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. As Gerard referenced, in connection with the new program, the authority entered into 2 new agreements with SUNY. One is the financing and development agreement, and that is just between DASNY and SUNY. And then there's a fund administration agreement between DASNY, SUNY, and the Commissioner of Taxation and Finance. The financing and development agreement requires SUNY to establish fees and charges at the various dormitory facilities that are sufficient to pay debt service on the bonds and cover operation and maintenance expenses at the facilities. The fund administration agreement requires that those fees and charges get deposited to the dormitory facilities revenue fund, and that is the fund under the general resolution that is available to pay the bonds. Bonds issued under the general resolution are payable solely out of the dormitory facilities revenue bond from the dormitory facilities revenues that are deposited in that fund. All bonds issued under the general resolution are on a parity with each other, but they're subordinate in right of payment and security to the bonds issued under the prior program. The authorized bonds are proposed to be sold here in one or more negotiated sales to a syndicate of underwriters. Each sale will be effectuated through a bond purchase agreement which contains the terms and conditions that are customary in connection with the sale of the authority's bonds. Are there any questions?
Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the transaction?
So moved.
Sandra, thank you. Is there a second? Paul, thank you very much. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. As there are none opposed, the motion carries unanimously. Virginia, before you go, would you take a moment and introduce the board to your colleague from Nixon
Sure, I
People?
would be delighted to. Thank you. We brought with us today Jennifer Wheeler. Jen has been working on DASNY matters for the last 9 years. Yes. And
I think it's very significant.
And so this is her first board meeting. She has not attended previously, so she wanted to see how the magic happens.
Thank you for being with us. And before you go, my second point, Virginia, just
I'm happy to answer all your questions.
The rumor has it that there is a celebratory event later today celebrating the career of the Honorable John Boat.
Who I still don't believe is retiring,
Yeah,
but yes.
I believe you. I hope you will convey to him this board's best wishes for his continued success in whatever his new career happens to be.
I absolutely will. Thank you very much. We hope to see as many of you as can make it to the office today. Please come by.
Thank you. 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock.
Behind tab 4 is the school district's revenue bond financing program, single approval credit summary with David Ostrander presenting and bond counsel Connie Powell. Connie?
Thank you.
It's taken me a while. It's taken me 2 years.
We can have it. My father thinks so.
And Justin Maroos Law Group. Thank you.
Justine.
Oh, Justine.
Justine, yeah.
That's a problem. I didn't have my glasses on.
Yeah. Justine, welcome you.
Thank you.
Good morning. The single approval and staff report provided to the members presents 15 series of tax-exempt and/or taxable bonds in an amount not to exceed $500 million to be sold through multiple negotiated offerings on behalf of various New York State school districts. Proceeds from the issuance of these bonds will be used to refinance the bond anticipation notes or bands of various New York State school districts, to finance the new money projects on behalf of these districts, and to refund bonds issued by DASNY through the school district revenue bond financing program. As in previous years, staff is requesting an amount not to exceed $500 million to meet both current demands from school districts for a pooled financing closing in June, as well as to accommodate additional demand that could occur later in the year. You'll recall the most recent school district's authorization occurred back on April 13th of 2016, when the board also adopted 15 series resolutions totaling $500 million. Since that time, there have been 7 series of bonds issued, totaling approximately $274 million issued under that approval, leaving 8 series remaining, totaling $225.9 million. The proposed June 2017 issuance is expected to exceed this amount. So based on some preliminary figures from the school districts, we currently anticipate a pool of at least 35 school districts totaling over $350 million for the June 2017 pool. Participation looks to have increased for this year's pool as interest rates are beginning to rise in relation to the statewide average interest rate. So just to quickly recap how the program works, school districts that issue their own obligations receive building aid based on the statewide average, which is now at 2%. School districts that issue through DASNY receive building aid that's based on their actual cost of borrowing. So as rates rise in relation to that statewide average, it makes it more difficult for the school districts to issue bonds below that number, which is 2%. And briefly, just to recap the security features, this will be the same as previous years. Semi-annual payments will be made pursuant to financing agreements backed by the full faith and credit of the school district's general obligation bonds. Statutory intercept through the state comptroller of any state aid due to participating districts for debt service on DASNY bonds, as well as bond insurance if available and economically advantageous. And one last update to the single approval credit summary. The co-lead managers for the June 2017 pool will be RBC and Raymond James. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, David. Are there questions for David before we move on to, please, Paul?
Just so I understand how the program works, each series will be for multiple school districts?
Correct. They're typically grouped by the ratings for those particular school districts. So we might have 30 school districts with 5 series of bonds, 4 or 5 series. So there will be multiple school districts participating in each series.
And each school has the allocable portion for it. It's the exposure to each school is for its portion of the series. Okay. And what's the financing history with these bonds?
The financing history.
I mean, have there been any problems with these in the past?
No. And we've been doing this since 2001, I believe, and now we have not had any issues.
And our security, DASNY security, is an intercept of monies that would go from the state to the school district. They also deliver to us their GO bonds. So their obligations to us are secured by those bonds and the intercept. We've never had to draw on either.
Thank you.
Thank you. Justine?
Good morning. There is before you for consideration the adoption of multiple series resolutions authorizing the issuance of fixed-rate school district revenue bond financing program, revenue bonds, in an aggregate amount not to exceed $500 million, pursuant to the master resolution adopted on May 29, 2002, as amended. The master resolution authorizes the issuance of the school district's revenue bonds to finance and refinance projects for school districts and to refund bonds issued pursuant to the master resolution. The master resolution constitutes the basic agreement between DASNY and the holders of the bonds issued under the master resolution. The master resolution provides for the issuance from time to time of multiple series of school district revenue bonds in an unlimited principal amount. Each series of school district revenue bonds issued under the master resolution is to be secured separately from all other series. DASNY is authorized to provide financing to school districts for school construction projects eligible for building aid and approved by the Commissioner of Education. This board has adopted multiple series of resolutions authorizing the issuance of school district revenue bonds, 1, to finance bond anticipation notes issued by school districts, 2, to finance projects for school districts directly, and 3, to refund districts' revenue bonds previously issued under the master resolution. In April of 2016, this board adopted 15 series resolutions authorizing the issuance of school district revenue bonds in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $500 million. For purposes of calculating building aid payable to school districts, state education law provides for an assumed amortization schedule for debt service payments. The assumed amortization schedule is based on a statewide average interest rate, which, if lower than a school district's actual cost of borrowing, can negatively impact the amount of building aid received by a school district for a project. However, for a school district that finances or refinances a project through DASNY, the assumed amortization schedule is based on the actual rate achieved on DASNY's applicable series of school district revenue bonds issued to finance the project, with certain adjustments. I now turn it over to Connie.
Thank you, Justine. As David and Justine have mentioned, at your April 6, 2016 board meeting, the board adopted 15 series resolutions numbered 65 through 79, authorizing $500 million of bonds. To date, approximately $274 million of bonds have been issued, leaving approximately $226 million of authorization remaining. As David and Justine explained, because of rising interest rates and the statewide average of 2%, staff anticipates that there'll be additional school districts desiring to participate in the program. Therefore, in order to accommodate the additional demand, staff is requesting that the remaining authorizations under series resolutions numbers 72 through 79 be rescinded and that new series resolutions be adopted on number 72 through 86. As has been the practice in the past, as demand warrants, DASNY will issue bonds to satisfy the demand. The resolutions, the series resolutions, delegate to various officers of DASNY the powers to determine the terms and details of the bonds, subject to customary limitations as are set forth in each of the series resolutions. As also has been the practice in the past, while the resolutions do not require credit enhancement, municipal bond insurance historically has been cost-effective with respect to certain series of bonds, and municipal bond insurance may but need not be utilized with respect to the bonds that will be issued under the Series 72 through 86 resolutions. The series resolutions also authorize various DASNY officers to execute and deliver the preliminary official statement and the official statement, bond purchase agreements, the financing agreements between each of the school districts and DASNY, continuing disclosure agreements, and any other documents necessary in connection with the financings. And all of the documents will be substantially identical to documents that were distributed or executed in connection with prior bonds issued under the master resolution.
As with prior series of school district revenue bonds issued to finance or refinance projects for school districts, each school district will enter into a financing agreement with DASNY with the approval of the Commissioner of Education. The projects to be financed or refinanced with the proceeds of the school district revenue bonds will be identified in each financing agreement prior to the issuance of school district revenue bonds. They will have been approved by the Commissioner of Education. In addition, each school district will issue bonds to DASNY backed by full faith and credit pledge of the applicable school district following voter approval pursuant to the local finance law. Under the financing agreements and the school district bonds issued to DASNY, the school districts are obligated to make loan repayments to DASNY, which together will be sufficient to cover principal and interest on Series 7286 bonds when due, regardless of whether the school districts receive state aid payments. Neither the Series 7286 bonds nor the school district's obligations under the financing agreements are secured by a lien on any facilities of the school districts or any property and may not be accelerated as a remedy for default. The school district's obligations to make the loan repayments due under financing agreements and other amounts due to DASNY under the financing agreements will, however, be supported by the statutory intercept mechanism of the program. In addition, the school district bonds will be backed by the full faith and credit pledge of the school districts, which requires the school districts to make levy taxes on amounts sufficient to enable the school districts to pay the school district bonds securing the loan obligations. We now welcome any questions.
Just a question about process. The reamortization rules and statute, that hasn't changed. That's as it has been. So that's in terms of a school district making a decision whether to refinance or not. There's nothing new there.
Correct.
So the only thing that might drive it would be the interest rate change that might make a difference in what we do.
Correct.
And am I correct? Am I clear that there will be no new bonds issued under the prior authorization?
Correct.
That will, under this, anything that's issued from this point forward will be under the current, this authorization.
These 15 series resolutions. Correct.
Okay.
We're actually rescinding.
We're rescinding the unauthorized.
Yes.
Correct.
Are there any other questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the transaction? Thank you, Sandra. Is there a second? Beryl, thank you very much. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, sir.
You're on number 5. Shall I do it?
Behind tab 5 is cerebral palsy affiliates transaction. Steve Kozer will present the credit summary and staff report.
The staff report presents one or more series of fixed and/or variable rate bonds in an amount not to exceed $37 million for a term not to exceed 30 years on behalf of United Cerebral Palsy Associations of New York State, Inc., which will be the only UCP affiliate to participate in the proposed financing. The borrower functions as the statewide coordinator of the 24 UCP affiliates and operates an extensive array of its own programs and services to individuals with developmental disabilities. For fiscal year 2016, the borrower had approximately $115 million in operating revenues. This financing will be the fifth DASNY issuance for this borrower. The borrower currently has a total of approximately $16 million in Series 2010 and Series 2014 DASNY bonds outstanding. Series 2017 bond proceeds are expected to be used to finance the acquisition and renovation of a condominium unit located at 40 Rector Street in Lower Manhattan, which will be the borrower's new headquarters, and to finance the acquisition of a 4-story building located at 174 Java Street in Brooklyn, which provides individualized residential alternative services. The 174 Java Street project is supported by a prior property approval from the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, or OPWDD. The Rector Street condominium will be paid through an administrative component the borrower receives from OPWDD, which is also subject to intercept and included in pledged revenues. The debt service on the Rector Street condominium is expected to be marginally higher than the leasehold payments the borrower is currently paying on the space it will be vacating. The Series 2017 bonds are expected to be sold through a private placement to one or more qualified institutional buyers, which the borrower will select in the near future. So while staff will update the board on the actual terms of the transaction and adoption of documents, the current expectation is for the Series 2017 bonds to amortize over a 30-year period with a tender after a lesser period. The borrower may choose to either refinance or negotiate a renewal prior to the tender. The Series 2017 bonds will be secured by a pledge of certain revenues and the statutory authority to intercept funds payable by any state or local agency or social service district, which would otherwise be payable to the borrower. No debt service reserve fund is currently contemplated, and the mortgage and financial covenants may be required by the purchasers. Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Steve. Are there questions for Steve?
Steve, we have the right to intercept, but we have not exercised that right with any of the previous funds, have we?
No.
It's not been necessary.
Paul?
So they're about to have the significant increase by taking over Catholic Charities. Does that overall strengthen their financial position? Or what's the
most of the properties, they're pretty much break even, but they become a larger operation. They're going to go from 115 million in operating revenues to about 165 million. So, but on a bottom line basis, I think it has minimal impact.
Other questions?
And it's expected, right, from yesterday, that the cost of financing the new building will be less than the cost if they were going to renew their existing lease, right?
Right. If they were permitted to extend their existing lease, the rents would increase. So the expectation is that the debt service would be lower than what they otherwise would be paying.
Other questions? And may I have a motion, please, to approve the transaction? Gerard, thank you. Is there a second? Paul, thank you very much. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. There are none opposed. The motion carries unanimously. Steve, thank you. The next agenda item is the report of the Corporate Governance Committee. Chairman Johnson.
The Governance Committee met yesterday here in New York. And after we reviewed the October board minutes, we went through the annual review of a variety of documents that are required by law to review annually. Made no changes to any of those, no recommendations and changes. There are several other documents that have to move from the Governance Committee to the whole board for adoption and discussion, and I'm going to ask Michael to carry us through those.
Thank you, Chairman Johnson. It's a busy month for the Governance Committee as it fulfills the annual review requirements under law. And these requirements can be broken down into two basic groups. First, the corporate governance items, and second, operational policies, procedures, and guidelines. From a governance standpoint, the Governance Committee did complete review yesterday of the Governance Committee Charter, the mission statement and performance measures, which include metrics to quantify performance goals, and the DASNY corporate bylaws. With respect to all three items, staff recommended no changes at this time. After discussion, the Governance Committee concurred with staff's recommendations, and the mission statement and corporate bylaws were forwarded for consideration by the full board on today's agenda. With respect to both of those items, the obligation of the board is to review. And if there's any comments or things that need to be noted or recommended revisions, we'll take them back and work on them as staff. So turning first to the mission statement and performance measures and metrics, the committee discussed these materials at length. If there's any comments that the full board wants to make on these, I'll turn the floor back over to Chair Johnson or any member who wants to speak. If no further comments are made, the record will reflect that the board, after reviewing the metrics and associated information, concurred with the recommendations from the Governance Committee that no further changes be made at this time. Anyone?
Hearing no comments, we move on.
All right. All right. So next would be the bylaws. Again, an annual review obligation on the part of the board. Same comment as I just made. If there's anything that a board member wants to add or discuss, turn the floor over. And if no further comments are made, the record will reflect that after considering the recommendations from the Governance Committee, that the board concurred.
The board concurs.
All righty. And so then turning to the policies and procedures and guidelines, we have two items that require some level of discussion here. First is the Code of Ethical Conduct for board members. Staff recommended an amendment to clarify to whom the chair of the board would report a potential conflict or a potential perception of a conflict of interest, and to address a situation that there's currently no one for the chair to report to except himself and the executive director, which would be Gerard. Staff is emphasizing, and that's in our memo as well, that the proposed change is not being recommended to deal with a current matter. It is being recommended to eliminate an uncertainty with respect to action required to be taken by the chair in the event he needs to make a report under the code. After discussion, the Governance Committee concurred with the recommendation, proposed modification by staff that's in the materials, and referred the proposed modification to the full board for consideration at today's meeting. This does require a resolution, and the resolution is in the packet.
Are there questions concerning the proposed revision? Very simple revision. We have to take a vote.
Yes, it's a motion, a resolution.
I'll now move it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Paul, for the second. All in favor, please indicate with aye.
Aye.
The motion carried unanimously. The revision is effective.
Thank you. And one last item, the Governance Committee also reviewed the policies, procedures, and guidelines for whistleblower protection, payment of compensation and reimbursement to and time and attendance of senior management, as well as the guidelines pertaining to the disposition of certain property. Staff is recommending no further changes at this time to either of those, and after review, the Governance Committee concurred. However, the guidelines pertaining to the disposition of certain property owned by DASNY are required to be reviewed annually and approved by the board, and then filed with the State Comptroller's Office by March 31st of each year. So in front of you in the packets, if there aren't any further comments on any of the policies I mentioned, is one resolution to reapprove our property guidelines, and we'll take care of filing that with, after the meeting.
Hearing no questions, may I have a motion, please? Thank you very much, John. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Sandra. All in favor, please indicate with aye.
Aye.
Resolution passes unanimously.
That concludes my part of the
Okay, thank you. Then we will move on to the seventh agenda item, which is the report of the president.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We have a few items to highlight today, including a resolution to adopt the proposed operating budget for fiscal year 2017. Before we get to that, I have some news to pass along. For the first time, a minority and woman-owned business enterprise has been selected by DASNY as our broker of record for our commercial, general, and excess liability insurance program. JP West, Inc. and its team will help oversee the program for construction projects by identifying insurance carriers who will write policies with total limits of $80 million. DASNY's insurance program covers 53 million square feet of property for clients, including CUNY, SUNY, and the New York State Department of Health. The engagement is structured so that JP West has the resources and the support it needs in order to meet DASNY's needs. Through this structure, JP West will build the capacity and experience it needs to take on a larger role with our organizations as well. In addition, we have also selected the Primary Care Development Corporation, PCDC, to administer a $19 million community healthcare revolving capital fund. The selection was made in consultation with the Department of Health. The fund is designed to improve access to capital for clinics and other organizations that have limited resources and are seeking to broaden access to primary care services. This revolving loan fund will provide affordable and flexible loans to these groups that are often unable to obtain or afford commercial financing. Eligible projects may include construction, renovation, expansion, and upgrading costs. The funds may also be used for credit enhancement and loan and debt service reserves to allow a facility to stimulate greater private sector investment. Now, you have also received updated budget documents which include the proposed DASNY operating budget for fiscal year 2017 to 2018, a financial plan, and a resolution adopting the proposed operating budget. The fee structure must also be adopted or re-adopted with the budget each year, and we have a resolution that would reapprove the structure you recently adopted. Kim Nadeau will now provide you with more details about the proposed budget, which will then be put to a vote. Kim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gerard. Good morning. Before you today, as Gerard mentioned, we are asking for your consideration for the proposed budget for fiscal year 2017-2018. The proposed budget is for $109 million, and it increased slightly, just 0.5% since we reviewed the proposed budget with you in January. That's primarily due to the cost of health insurance, which we've seen rising as we see our population shift towards a larger share of retirees versus active participants, and DASNY often pays the entire premium associated with those retirees. As a summary, outside of that change from the January discussion we had, the budget again is $109 million. $80 million of that is our internal operating budget, and of that $80 million, the majority, or $70 million of that, is related to compensation costs. As Gerard also mentioned, we do need to reapprove the fee structure that you approved in January, and again, there were no changes proposed to that since the January approval. Are there any questions on the proposed budget?
Hearing none, May I have a motion, please, to approve the budget as presented? Thank you, Sandra. Is there a second? Beryl, thank you. All in favor, please indicate with aye.
Aye.
There is no opposition. The motion carries unanimously.
Now, DASNY's, thank you, Kim. DASNY's annual credit enhancement report has been updated for 2016. Portia Lee will now present the credit enhancement report and will provide you with a market update.
Thank you, Gerard. Behind tab 10 are the standard public finance reports as well as the annual credit enhancement report, which is really at the back of that packet. So there are a number of pie charts here, and I'd just like to quickly go over the results of this review. We do this each year. So if you look at the pie chart on the first page, so the top pie chart on the left, that basically shows for 2016 the breakout of the total debt outstanding, that's both fixed and variable rate for the not-for-profit portfolio. You'll see that 83% is fixed rate, 17% is variable rate. That's really pretty consistent from last year, 2015, which is the pie chart on the right. At the bottom of that first page, you'll see that pie chart, which is basically reflecting the type of credit enhancement for total debt outstanding, again, fixed and variable rate for the not-for-profit institutions. You'll see that 77% approximately is unenhanced, 6.53% is monoline bond insured, 4.24% letter of credit backed, 5.04% other types of enhancement like FHA, Sunny Mae, and 7.41% is unenhanced private placements. If you go to page 2, what we're really showing you here now is the variable rate portfolio for the not-for-profits. The first page showed you the total debt for the not-for-profits, including both fixed and variable. This is really now showing just for the variable rate portfolio, because that's really where the risk would be, to the extent that on the fixed rate portfolio, your rates are fixed. The variable rate portfolio, depending on the type of enhancement, there could be things such as renewal risks there. So if you look at the chart on the top of page 2, again, this is the type of credit enhancement for the variable rate not-for-profit portfolio, and you can see that basically we've got 22.5% with letters of credit, roughly 6.5% with bond insurers, 5.7% with other enhancement, 29.3% with that's other and unenhanced, and almost 36% private placement unenhanced. I guess I would just note that to the extent that we're talking about unenhanced for this variable rate portfolio, these are folks that basically provide self-liquidity. And we do like to track sort of the private placement unenhanced separate and apart, just so that we can keep track. I think Daryl, you were noting earlier sort of the trends that we're seeing with the private placements.
There's a significant increase.
Exactly. So, what you really see there is the letter of credit exposure is dropping, and the unenhanced private placements have increased since last year.
Portia, I'm sorry. What is self-liquidity?
It's when the institution itself, the borrower, the obligor, is providing its own liquidity with its own resources. If you look at the chart on the bottom left, that's a variable rate portfolio. Again, for the not-for-profits, that's showing you the breakout by specific credit enhancer. On page 3, you get a much more detailed view of really the backup information regarding the specific credit enhancers. Page 4 shows you the total debt of DASNY, which is $48 billion, where approximately 69% is public or state-supported debt, 31% is private not-for-profit debt, and as you can see, very, very little of the public or state-supported debt is variable rate. It's less than 2%. So as to the overall takeaways, it's really, Sandra, what you were saying, and Daryl, the comment that you were making earlier today. which is, that we're seeing that the unenhanced portfolio is shrinking, or rather the enhanced portfolio is shrinking, the unenhanced portfolio is growing. Not a surprise, right, given sort of where bond insurance is at this point in time and, sort of its impact on the market. And additionally, the other key takeaway is that the private placements are really increasing. And as we've commented, over the course of the last couple of years, it's really, you've seen a number of private placements, and you've seen them really, I think, at both ends of the spectrum, where we've seen sort of smaller unrated institutions that are undertaking private placements, but we're also seeing larger rated institutions that are undertaking private placements. And, as we saw today, I guess now we're maybe starting to see some folks in the middle undertaking private placements.
And an increase of both. I mean, the private placements unenhanced, the combination that we're seeing increases in that combination.
Yep. And I guess the one thing I would point out about that is, that oftentimes, and you heard this here today, rates will be set for a set period. The bonds may be amortizing over 30 years, but they're fixed for a certain period of time, 5, 7, 10 years, upon which there's a tender. So there's some renewal risk there.
As interest rates rise, do you see that private placement trend, if anything, increasing, decreasing? Of what impact? And I guess now there's the chance of an interest rate increase next week is 80%. What is it? 80%, 90%, like 90%, right? I mean, really high. So, do you see how is that going to have impact besides fewer bonds, fewer refinancings? Is there going to be more or less private placements?
That's a good question, Carol. I'm not sure that I have the answer to that as far as the rate environment is concerned. I guess the observation that I would make is that the banks that are purchasing these bonds are purchasing them because it's advantageous for them. So, for example, a number of these banks were banks that had previously provided letters of credit.
Right.
And instead of providing letters of credit, it's more advantageous to them. I think it's because of the capital requirements.
What I was referring to actually before the meeting started, the tier 1, tier 2 requirements.
I think because of the capital requirements, you're seeing that those banks who had previously provided letters of credit are now purchasing the bonds in these private placement transactions. So my sense is that their interest is driven from that perspective.
So they're sopping up maybe any extra demand, any lapse in demand. They're kind of making up for it right now, or not. I mean, question is it?
I'm not sure, because again, I'm not sure how much of this is specifically rate driven.
Right.
I think it's driven by the demand from the purchaser's point of view, as to their own requirements. Things like sort of those capital requirements, that now make this more advantageous for them. Having said that, I think that we've seen that the rates have been advantageous for folks, but remember again that to the extent that we're seeing two sides of the different ends of the spectrum, the smaller institutions that are unrated and typically would not be accessing the public markets, or because if they did, they would be accessing them on an unrated basis. So it's a little bit hard to compare, I think, to the question that you're asking, right, from a rate perspective. But having said that, we have also seen institutions on the other end of the spectrum, right, sort of the bigger institutions with significant financial strength. And I think we've seen there that the rates that they have achieved have been very, very favorable. And that is why they're entering into those private placement transactions, because they have the wherewithal, to be entering into them basically on the terms that they would like to see, from a document perspective as well as from a rate perspective.
Right. Well, we can continue this
Okay.
offline.
They also get terms, which is very favorable, but more importantly, it gives them an opportunity to work with these financial institutions who are looking to have deeper relationships. So there's a reciprocal
Right, a
aspect
win-win.
to that
Yeah, I think
for
you're
both of
right.
them. But I think, look, it's hard to say where this goes, but clearly there are going to be more liquidity providers coming into this market because the banks in particular, they can't access every aspect of the market. So you'll start to see investment management firms, they're doing that, and they're playing a role. So this is a new normal for us. We don't know.
Right. No, it
We
would
don't.
be interesting to see what happens as the rates rise and yes.
The simplicity, quickness, and access in terms of getting money, there's something to be said for that, even if you have to pay 200 basis points more, right? I want this money, I want to get it very quickly because I need to do this, and I don't want to report.
Right. Yes. Well, that's yes. That's a key.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions for
Thank you.
Portia?
So just one note, on the last page of the report is a listing of letters of credit and the renewal dates for the next 5 or 6 years, and we are in contact with folks. We have renewals coming up in 2017. Lastly, just on the credit enhancement report, I just would like to give my thanks to Andy Purcell because he's the person who puts this report together. He does it every year, and it's a big undertaking. As to the brief market update,
Sure.
Since my last written report, we've priced 4 transactions. Orange Regional Medical Center, we were actually, I think, right in the market the day of the last board meeting in February. Columbia University, Bank Street, and we were just in the market yesterday with Teachers College, which was it's a very, very favorable pricing. As we had noted and Vero had highlighted, it appears that there's strong sentiment that the Fed will raise rates at its next meeting. Commentary out there saying what I saw really did say sort of as high as a 96% chance that we're going to see a rate hike in March. So total supply for the week is approximately $10 billion. That's up from last week at $4.4 billion. A couple of big deals in the market this week, a $2.4 billion California GO transaction, as well as an $800 million New York City Transitional Finance Authority transaction. Municipal bond funds have reported outflows of $277 million last week. That was after 7 weeks of positive inflows. And since the last board meeting, 10 and 30-year MMD have increased by 14 and 13 basis points respectively. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Portia. Are there other questions for Portia? Before we move to the next agenda item, behind tab 7, there is a resolution which we did not adopt. Proposed resolution which we did not adopt. It is it proposes that we adopt a fee structure for the dormitory authority. You might have presumed that it was a part of the resolution adopting the operating budget. It was not, and we do need to act on it. It is 5 or 6 pages into tab 7. It is entitled Resolution Adopting a Fee Structure for the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York. It's a 2-page, sorry, it's a 4-page document.
That's what we presented at the...
Yeah, I was just going to say, we've actually seen the document on a couple of occasions, both in its black line form and in its final form. So we've had a chance to review it in several iterations. Sandra, looks like this.
I got it.
Got it? Okay. Are there any questions about it? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve it? Beryl, thank you. Is there a second? Gerard, thank you very much. All in favor, please indicate with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. We're now going to go into an executive session. May I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss the financial and credit history of a particular corporation? Gerard, thank you. Is there a second? Paul, thank you. All in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. The motion carries unanimously. Where's Larry? Okay.
Sarah.
Let the record reflect that we have just left an executive session during which the only decision that was made was to return to the public session. I think on my agenda, there are a couple of pieces of the President's report for me. If you cover those as quickly as you can, then we can actually get to the last two topics, construction, the General Counsel's report, and we'll move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was fortunate to have multiple opportunities to discuss how the tax exemption on municipal bonds is a powerful and essential tool for broadening opportunity. On February the 17th, I participated in a panel discussion on federal infrastructure proposals at the Rainbow Push Coalition 20th Annual Wall Street Project Economic Summit. There I discussed how it is paramount that the exemption continues so that not only roads and bridges, which are getting a lot of the attention, but also schools, hospitals, and public transportation systems can get the financing that they need. I noted that the alternative financing tools, by alternative, I'm talking about what the administration had presented beyond tax exemption, not a delivery method. They will not deliver the broad array of projects currently supported by tax-exempt municipal bonds. They're significantly smaller when you really cost them out over a 10-year period. I relayed these same sentiments as a panelist for the Bond Buyers National Outlook Conference. I noted that as the U.S. looks to rebuild its infrastructure, we must keep focus on infrastructure that enhances access, not just those projects that generate direct revenue. I will continue to speak about this matter. It's central to DASNY's mission, and it has immense implications for the public infrastructure that forms the foundation for much of our nation's economy and way of life. In our construction division, we have also launched a surety bond trading program that will help MWBE firms develop the capacity to serve as prime contractors. The training program's 23 classes cover a range of topics, including bid preparation, budgeting, cash flow management, and project management. In addition, the training program partners MWBE firms with surety bond providers, including Travelers Insurance, to improve understanding of bonding requirements. Completing the program will help the participating firms access larger surety bond capacity, and with that, larger roles in construction projects. The classes will be held at our New York State office and streamed live to participants across New York State. We've started that already. And on March the 10th, I will be speaking to a group of undergraduate students about the value of networking and relationship building at an event sponsored by the National Association of Securities Professionals at Citibank at 388 Greenwich Street this Friday. With that, I will ask Steve Perot to provide you with an update on the construction division work.
Thank you. Behind tab 8 are the 3 construction division reports. The first report, the construction projects report. On the cover is a photo of a recently rehabilitated WHCR radio station project we did up at City College. This is a community radio station owned and operated by City College. The studio is located in the North Academic Building on City College campus. The scope was to renovate new office space, the lobby space, offices, classrooms, and a break room. Our budget was $2.1 million. Lewandowska Architects was the designer. Design started in March of 15, completed in September of 15. Our GC was Constructomics, and construction began in March of 2016 and completed in March of 2017, just recently. Some of the challenges were the radio station needed to be open during the time of construction, so obviously working in an occupied space. There were restrictions on noise and the type of activities we could do at certain times of the day. And the fabrication and installation of the feature wall, which is the translucent curved wall you see in the photo, was a complication with regards to installation. I've got a couple of additional photos I'll pass around on the project. On page 3, under the new projects, we have 2 new projects. I'll highlight the Brockport 250-bed design-build project, currently in design, shooting for the fall of 2018 for occupancy, and an HCR project, Fresh Creek Coastal Protection Project, $8.5 million. So in total, over $30 million in new projects this past month. On page 7, construction expenditures. Prior fiscal year through January 16, we were at $506 million. Current fiscal year through January 2017, $515 million. That's an increase of $9 million over last year. And just a few updates on projects and programs. I'll start with NYCHA. The 3 initiatives under the NYCHA program are progressing. Under security, our projects are in various stages of scoping, construction, proposal generation, review, and approval. Construction, closeout, and turnover to NYCHA. 5 of the electrical projects under the security heading are in progress with work authorizations to design consultants being issued. In total, there's over 80 projects in the security area. As far as appliances and the purchase and installation of them, that activity continues. We are active at the following developments: Red Hook, Marlborough, Amsterdam, Gompers, Surfside, and Madison. And on the quality of life side, over 75 projects. We've made assignments on 32 of them for term consultants, and we are now issuing work authorizations, and design activities will follow. SUNY, work continues at several ongoing capital renovation projects. Those projects are located at Plattsburgh, Alfred, New Paltz, Canton, Oswego, and Albany. All of those projects are scheduled for completion and occupancy for the fall 2017 semester. And the last project update is for the Court Officers Training Academy. Schedule update number 28 was received last week. Indicates that the project has slipped from a completion standpoint from May of 17 to June of 17. Work continues on all trades. We'll be attending the next biweekly project status meeting scheduled for tomorrow. And that concludes my report.
Are there questions for Steve?
Lots of negative publicity on NYCHA lately. Anything there that we should be concerned about?
I'm not concerned, frankly. I mean, our projects, we're moving them to the best of our ability. There's a fair amount of interaction with our consultants and NYCHA, and all parties have been working diligently to keep these projects moving forward. So I think there's, yep.
I would just say we are very laser-like in terms of executing on these projects, and Steve has really even focused on increasing our capacity to get these things done. Saying that, there are always concerns about NYCHA, okay, because of the capital constraint. So from where Steve sits in terms of the area that he's focused on, I think we feel very comfortable and confident in terms of as long as we are able to execute on our own, we'll move this. But they have some larger challenges, very large challenges, and we do have to navigate through that periodically. So we have a lot of conversation with them. He has weekly meetings with them. We have meetings internally to talk about, what can we leverage and how can we leverage those resources. So we know our timelines, but we're always concerned about those external factors that we don't control based on the fact that they are really severely out of control. That's separate from what we're dealing with.
Thank you. Speaking of timelines, this one is very short. Mike, do you have additional?
Very briefly, last night the governance committees for NGHP Holding Corporation and Atlantic Avenue Healthcare Property Holding Corporation, the two DASNY subsidiaries, held their annual review meeting and moved materials forward that will appear next week or next month. At the end of our regular board meeting, there will be board meeting for both subsidiaries as required by law. This will include an update and a report that Larry and Debbie Payton are working on. I've seen the draft and it looks to be in good shape. So I'm just letting you know that's on our calendar coming up. And also on our calendar next month, we plan to give Debbie's working on a short overview on QUIBs in the private placement environment to address some of the questions that have come up from Jerry and John Gardner. And since John's out today, we're going to try to do it next month. Is that all right?
That's fine.
Thank you.
Is there any other business to come before this board in this meeting? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to adjourn? Thank you, Gerard. Is there a second? John, thank you very much. All in favor? Aye. See you all on the 12th of April in Albany, which I think, just thought of this, right? It's Thomas Jefferson's birthday.
Really?
I
wouldn't have known that.
Of course. Hamilton.
No.
I'm not going to celebrate Thomas Jefferson's birthday.
I'm certainly not going to celebrate that.